Join us now on a fantastic voyage into the stars. The previous space races were but a means of propaganda, control, and military advantage. A money laundering scheme, selling the idea of an empty universe waiting to be penetrated. But lies have been revealed, gravy has been ladled, and times have changed. Today, all of Tree Bear and Old Wise Bear will venture onward with a new anthem to free the crippled minds of the masses. An anthem titled The Fool's Choir.
Too strong to carry on in a black mirror, as I'm a seer, and I fear that the truth is unwelcome there anyway. A power down all around if you're ready to hear. It's so clear, you'll be freer. Step out of your cloud with me today, 'cause there's a world out there.
Okay, let's do this. I am live again, second time. So excited to talk about this book. How do we get this straight? There we go. Stranger Than Fiction. A small little tome about some of what happened over the past 2 years. And by some, I mean all. Entirely all of it, documented from beginning to end with as many citations as a human being could have possibly gathered over the time. So excited. I just got off of talking with Patrick Daly at the Pat Life podcast. You should check that out. He's got some of the most interesting guests I've seen on a podcast, especially today when you compare it to some of the other, interview type shows. Patrick is willing to have on basically anyone. And I would know he had me on. So I must be somewhat out there. But very, very enjoyable conversation. We went pretty deep this time, a lot deeper than last time. And today we're going to go deep. There's so much to talk about. I am just starting up again, streaming and doing this for the first time in a while, doing videos for the first time in a while. And so I'm kind of realizing doing this at a 1 episode per week clip, how much things happen over the course of a week. And so as my pre-book release party, which again, this comes out on September 6th, so next Tuesday, on Amazon, on my website, I'm going to read some from it as I go through some stories about stuff that happened during the week, as in the context of Moderna equals Firefest plus communism, because that's the truth. That's what Moderna is. It's a joke of a company, and we're going to see how long I last on YouTube in general, talking about stuff like this. Maybe it will be better than I think. Maybe it will not. We will find out. But there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. I don't know if I want to start with that or if I want to start with I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about some Lord of the Rings stuff, because that's pretty hilarious what's going on there. And then maybe I'll catch up on Andrew Tate, who is now on Gab, so I can read his posts now, which I couldn't do last week. I guess I'll start with the topic of the conversation. I was just listening into Anomaly, whose takes on COVID I like a lot. He was talking about how the COVID power grab has transitioned into one of the most evil regimes America's had in who knows how long. I mean, for people who watched Biden talk last night, which I don't know why you would, he doesn't know who he is or where he is. He's a demented pervert. And I don't really know how else to describe it. It'd be like checking in at your local insane asylum to see what they have to say there, listening to him talk. And he had the whole, red light show going on, because of course he did. And this is the same person who a few measly 9 months back said that we would all be dead for Christmas. Me and my whole family, you and your whole family, if you watch this and like the content of the book that I'm about to go through. So this is an evil man, right? And I don't know why, I mean, I get that he sits in a geography that people consider important, but I don't. What's going to come out of his mouth, right? There's nothing that he could do at this point, or sorry, the people who puppet him can do at this point that would be surprising. But I appreciate the coverage that Anomaly does of old Joe. Now, transitioning into something similar, a topic that old Joe had to transition off of because he's the most powerless president ever, and he couldn't enforce his will on people. Transitioning into the topic at hand. So I will share my screen. Again, I'm still getting used to this live streaming thing, so I'm going to do the best I can here. But let's talk about Moderna. Moderna. So people probably may or may not know the story of Fyre Fest before I get into this. So Fyre Fest was a music festival that was supposed to take place in some kind of tropical setting, and it had this guy who was doing the hyping of it, right? He was trying to set this thing up. He was posting all over social media about how great this music festival is going to be. Well, I recommend watching the documentaries on it on either Netflix or Hulu. It was a disaster. It didn't happen. The people who went there to these islands were stuck in like tents in storms and stuff, and they had to get driven home. And it was just an entire fraud, right? And you've seen this kind of example with other types of businesses too, like Theranos is another example in the pharma industry of a total fraud. And basically what these companies do is they try to they build hype around their products, right? Get tons of investment, and then whether it succeeds or not, they make off, right? And they run away with the money. Well, like I said, whether it's Theranos or Fyre Fest, or I know there was another documentary, I think it was one called WeWork. That was a pretty interesting one. These ventures are always fronted by these very, very enthusiastic people, right? In Moderna's case, that's Stefan Bancel, and we'll get to who he is in a second and what his company was before COVID in a second. But the reason I bring it up today is this article that we have here. Moderna sues Pfizer and BioNTech for patent infringement over COVID shot. I don't know whether I can say this word on YouTube, but you get the point. Jibber jabbers. Now, we'll get to the reasons why this is hilarious in a second, other than it just being grabbler football in general. But let's dive in a little bit. So Moderna is suing Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech for patent infringement, alleging they copied the technology developed years before by Moderna. So, if it's surprising, right, that Pfizer would even be able to get their technology, right? Pfizer itself is a company which, in this book, I talked with Patrick about this on his podcast the other day, has an incredible amount of criminal charges itself. It's a company that, if you read the list of criminal charges that I cited in Stranger Than Fiction, you will be like, how is this company even allowed to exist anymore? But nonetheless, when you understand that, it becomes less surprising how they would, if they did take some form of Moderna's technology, that they would do so. But the interesting thing is that it's not just Moderna's technology, which is what we'll get to. So they're filing lawsuits to protect their super innovative mRNA technology, blah, 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 blah. Moderna on its own and the partnership of Pfizer, BioNTech were the two first groups to develop a shot for the novel coronavirus. Okay, so that's the context, that's the background that we have here. And next, I'm going to kind of go in order a little bit. I'm going to start by reading from a passage from my book. I'm just going to read straight out of it. Maybe provide some context, but it's pretty decent context as it is. This passage comes from two different articles by the medical media company Stat. Two specifically, as they would title them, exposés on Moderna. So again, these came in September 2016, and then there was a second one that I cite in a second from, I think, 2017, about all sorts of problems that were plaguing Moderna. In September 2016, the national bio and tech reporter for the medical media company Stat wrote a lengthy expose on the ego, ambition, and turmoil plaguing Moderna, referred to as one of biotech's most secretive startups. This is 2016, okay? So just understand the context here. Not much time has passed since 2016. The story goes on to explain how Moderna CEO Stéphane Bancel, who, like I said, is the eccentric CEO of Moderna, created an environment which was loath to publish its work in Science or Nature, but enthusiastic to herald its potential on CNBC or CNN. Now, if that doesn't sound familiar to you, it should. Anthony Fauci, Rochelle Walensky, love to flaunt their opinions on CNBC and CNN without so much as a scientific study. In fact, we might get to this today. If not, you'll find it in the book. But Fauci, when he announced remdesivir, without having published the study that he had claimed to have done on it with the NIH, he went straight to the White House, announced from the White House that remdesivir would be the new standard of care. Again, hadn't published a study to say so. And the study that he did, that was talking about, that hadn't been published yet, was not peer-reviewed either. And 2 or 3 days later, the FDA grants emergency use authorization to remdesivir. So again, these people who were involved in the last 2 years are all like this, right? They all would rather go on CNBC or CNN and market their products, which is what they're doing, right? They're marketing people. They're not scientists, as we will find. We continue. Former employees, of which there were many the company hemorrhaged, allegedly due to Bansel's ego and lack of any medical or scientific background, charged that Bansel was actually running an investment firm, and then hoping it also develops a drug that's successful. He would be in luck thanks to the communism part of the equation, which we will get to. The company lost all manner of employees too at the time of the Stat article, including executives, 2 heads of chemistry, its chief scientific officer, its head of manufacturing, its head of cancer research, its head of research and development, a significant loss as far as a pharma company's future outlook is concerned, and its head of rare disease research. Several of these departures came after periods of less than 18 months on the job. This because, prior to 2020, the company never developed a successful drug and was one of the least transparent of any in the industry in sharing any kind of data or trial information. So, now here we are today. How did they get from this point, right, to today? We continue. And the story as it related to the COVID era gets even more troubling too. As recently now as January 2017, Stat again reported on Moderna, highlighting a serious problem with the mRNA delivery system used in the COVID inoculations of today. This problem would present such an issue that a former employee explained solving it would require a miraculous Hail Mary sort of save. The problem with this lipid nanoparticle delivery system was that with too small a dose, there wouldn't be enough protein produced to make a difference. So now we're going to get a little scientific before I keep going, right? And not too scientific, but a little scientific. So the way that these shots are supposed to work, right? And I'm not vilifying the technology. Understand, I don't have a problem with new technology. I'm just describing the issue that Stat described Moderna facing. The problem with this lipid nanoparticle delivery system was that with too small a dose, right? So the mRNA in the shots is meant to be delivered to the cells, and it's coated with lipid nanoparticle delivery system so that it can penetrate the cells, which it cannot do on its own, right? And so with too small a dose, there wouldn't be enough protein produced to make a difference. With too high a dose, however, the drug would be too toxic for patients. Because of this, Moderna pored over the medical literature for diseases that might be treated with very small amounts of additional protein. Unfortunately for them, the list of such diseases was very, very short. One project in the works by the company for such a disease, called Crigler-Najjar, still proved to fail too, with whistleblowers ultimately decrying safety issues. So, I think we can stop there with my book for now. You can clearly see that this is a company that had a serious hurdle to climb, right? A hurdle that if it was going to come to market with a product, the general public and its investors and everyone involved should really have been informed of how they solved it, right? Because I'm curious about it. I remain curious about it. I think anybody who questions anything that these people have done would be curious about it. If they couldn't even keep the toxicity down for one of these, less known diseases, these diseases that needed less protein, right? Needed less protein to be produced. How did they do it for SARS? And on top of that, right? Knowing what we know now, what they say is that the shots currently produce like 40 trillion packages, right? They insert with like 40 trillion packages of mRNA, right? Does that sound small to you? I mean, I don't have the context here from the stat article or the people involved about how much would be small versus large. Perhaps 40 trillion is small. It doesn't sound small to me. But again, these are things that would have been nice to know that the CDC and FDA probably should have had to answer for, still should answer for, that they simply do not answer for. How did they solve this problem, right? And is it still a problem? Because again, these are open questions that going on CNN and MSNBC, they just don't seem to want to explain to anyone. We continue. So again, this is where we are as of 2017, an unanswered dilemma, right? With a new technology that had been introduced maybe 3 decades earlier by Robert Malone, right? He had this concept that you could inject mRNA into a cell if you had the right delivery system, one that's not toxic, hopefully, and that you could instruct the cell to do a certain objective specifically related to treating a disease. So we continue. 2018. Bill Gates, Trump super interested in universal flu shot. Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, said he helped get Donald Trump super interested in a universal flu shot, that the president offered him a position in the White House. Gates said during also an interview with Stat, and this is the interesting part, right? That the president on March 15th told him that he should associate himself with American innovation. The interview comes just days after the billionaire philanthropist pledged $12 million to funding for the shot. So, Bill Gates, a known globalist, appealed to Donald Trump's Americanism, and basically, Trump was super interested. He reached out to Scott Gottlieb, who I guess was then the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. I believe now he has some kind of role in, I think it was Pfizer. I don't remember. He some kind of conflict of interest. But Trump reaches out to Scott Gottlieb and asks about such a universal flu shot, right? Now, we haven't established yet what kind of universal flu shot. We will get to that. Fast forward to 2019. Donald Trump signs Executive Order 13887, modernizing influenza shots in the United States to promote national security and public health. Now, I won't go through this entire thing, but the timing is exceptionally interesting. September 19, 2019. Obviously, this is 3 months or so before the alleged pandemic began, according to the World Health Organization, which says that I think the Chinese reported to them the first cases of pneumonia around the 1st, and then by the 9th, they determined it was coronavirus. Again, this is 3 months before, and we will just skim the language. Influenza viruses are constantly changing as they circulate globally in humans and animals. Relatively minor changes in these viruses cause annual seasonal influenza outbreaks, which result in millions of illnesses. Periodically, a new influenza virus emerged from animals, including birds and pigs. They can spread efficiently, blah, 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 blah. Let's get to some good stuff. A little bit further. Okay, here we go. Most influenza vaccines are made in chicken eggs using a 70-year-old process that requires months-long production timelines, limiting their utility for pandemic control. Rely on a potentially vulnerable supply chain of eggs, require the use of shot viruses adapted for growth in eggs, which could introduce mutations. Now, we continue. So what's the solution, right? Investigate, in collaboration with the HHS, alternative correlates of immune protection that could facilitate development of next-generation influenza shots. Direct the conduct of a study to assess the feasibility of using DoD's advanced manufacturing facility for manufacturing cell-based and recombinant influenza shots during a pandemic. Okay, so clearly, right, there's this issue that we have, apparently, with the egg-based model of shots. Why this is on the front of Trump's plate would probably confuse a lot of people. Does this sound like something that he wrote? Now, an interesting question in general, if it's not something he wrote, which clearly it's not, I mean, without help, at least, I don't know that that Mr. Trump would be this interested in such a topic. But why is it that he can get this kind of help on an executive order on writing such a thing? You know, you would think if we're going to have all sorts of executive orders, that it would be the order of the executive and not someone who just happens to contact him and convince him that America needs such a thing, right? Someone who we know is a globalist, who we just covered a second ago. We continue. Remember this language, okay? As 1 month later, we continue and we have a meeting at the Milken Institute, which might be familiar to people. This came on October 29, 2019. Let's take a listen here. I don't know actually if I'm going to be able to play this, so let me just pull it up here. I'll just read from it. This is the beauty of this book, is I have basically everything you could ever want to know in it. Sorry for the delay. Here we go. Okay. So in that video, we start with a man from the New Yorker, a journalist, or so he is called, named Michael Specter. Michael Specter describes the problem that they are facing that is standing in the way of a universal flu shot. Okay? Again, the same concept mentioned by Bill Gates to Donald Trump a year before. Why don't we blow the system up, Specter says. I mean, obviously, we can't just turn off the spigot on the system we have and then say, hey, everyone in the world should get this new shot we haven't given to anyone yet. But there must be some way that we grow vaccines mostly in eggs, the way we did in 1947. So Specter is simply describing the problem here, right? And the problem that they have determined, again, is that they want to blow the system up of egg-based shots, right? And they want everyone in the world to get this new technology that they haven't given to anyone yet. So we're already on like a level of psychopathy, in my opinion, but let's see where it continues to. So Anthony Fauci goes next with one of the most incredible statements I've ever heard. In order to make the transition from getting out of the tried and true egg growing, Fauci says, which we know gives results which can be beneficial, I mean, we've done well with that, to have something that is much better. You have to prove that this works. Yeah. And then you have to go through all of the clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3s, and then show that the particular product is going to be good over a period of years. That alone, if it works perfectly, is going to take a decade. So we really do have a problem with how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that. Unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way, because you do need both. Okay, I don't even know where to begin here, but we could begin with this. You have to prove that this works, so we really do have a problem. Imagine if I said, go buy this book. I'm not going to show you anyone's opinion of it. Here, you can see one on the back. They liked it. Imagine if I just said, I want to find a way to make you read these 600 pages without having to prove that it's worth your time. In fact, maybe I am going to try to pressure people to fire you from your job unless you read these 600 pages. I would be a psychopath if I did that, right? And that's a book. Now we're talking about injecting something into your body. A new technology that they want everyone in the world to inject into their body, okay? And he has Anthony Fauci perceives a problem with having to prove that this works. Never mind the safety, okay, which he also complains about, but he doesn't even think he should have to prove to you that it works. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And he doesn't care what your perception is. He's going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way. Now, do these sound like the words of someone who follows the Hippocratic Oath? Do these sound like the words of someone who is not who is trying to help anyone? Anyone. Why can't you just prove that it works, right? If you're a scientist, which professionally I am, if I'm trying to convince you of something, I have no choice but to prove to you why you should believe what I'm saying. If I don't think that I should have to prove to you what I'm saying, then you can just ignore what I'm saying, right? I don't go into my job and say, hey, here's what you should do. And then someone says, that doesn't make sense to me. And I just say, that's misinformation, okay? Ban him on social media, right? I mean, this is crazy. This mentality, whether the product that they're pushing here cures everyone in the world of all illnesses or decimates the entire population, right? This is crazy. This is not someone who should have any authority at all. But it gets worse somehow when they shift to Rick Bright, who is just one of the most unknown players in this game, but just a truly incredible, truly hilarious hubris-ridden specimen. So Rick Bright continues and acknowledges, first of all, that we are dealing with the technology in question. There might be a need, Bright says, following Fauci, or even an urgent call for an entity of excitement out there that's completely disruptive, that's not beholden to bureaucratic strings and processes. But it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere. We could get the RNA sequence from that, beam it to a number of regional centers, if not local, if not in your home at some point, and print those shots on a patch and self-administer. Oh, man. Yes, it is too crazy to think, actually, that you just predicted where it would come from, and the technology behind it that would be used, that would be pressured on everyone in the world, that would be assumed to be the only way out of it from the very beginning, which was a horrific assumption. And little do people know about Rick Bright that in a propaganda documentary, I don't remember the name, but it's cited in here. Rick Bright is the same guy who in a documentary about his experience during this whole thing, about how much he was frustrated with Mr. Trump, said that he wishes he'd never heard of the drug hydroxychloroquine. It's a drug. What do you mean you wish you'd never heard of it? I mean, these are the children that we're dealing with. Like, these people are children, and they are so ridden with hubris that they just come out and admit the very things that they're trying to hide. I don't even know. Maybe they're trying to hide it, maybe not. But again, here we have a scheme, a open conspiracy, okay? A conspiracy is a plan between people to do something. An open conspiracy, right, to sell the world on mRNA shots and replace the egg model. And not only to do that, but to get everyone in the world to do it. Again, none of these are my words. These are their words entirely. And they predicted that it could come from China somewhere, and they could get the RNA sequence from China and just beam it to the world. Okay, incredible. Let's continue. Whew. This, the most bewildering piece that I think I've seen the entire time. The most bewildering article, the most bewildering citation in this entire book. Okay? The NIH claims joint ownership of Moderna's coronavirus shot. June 25th, 2020. Oh boy. So Bob Herman, little did he know, published the most incredible scandal ever, at least in the past couple decades, as just your casual morning read in Axios on June 25th, 2020. Now, this headline alone should make people scratch their heads a little bit, considering, how exactly is it not concerning that the organization alleging an emergency is a part owner of the alleged solution, that was pressured on, coerced on people as a result of said emergency, right? Bob Herman has some answers, in his opinion, with his also horrific, I don't know what this is, but like this American flag, like terror looking picture. A normal person would look at this and be like, that's horrifying, kind of like Biden's lights the other day, his little light show. But let's see how Herman presents it. So Herman says that the National Institutes of Health may own intellectual property that undergirds a leading coronavirus shot being developed by Moderna, according to documents obtained by Axios and an analysis from Public Citizen. Why it matters. Here we go. This is the classic media hypnosis tactic to tell you why it matters, so you don't have to think about it and you can not worry about the pressure of trying to figure any of that out. It matters because the federal government has an actual stake in this shot. It could try to make it free or low-cost public good with wide distribution if it turns out to be safe and effective. Okay. This is like where we begin with our problems with the media, right? How can this be one sentence? And how can you get away with saying it's free or low cost public good? Again, these are the people, the government, the bureaucracies that are responsible are the ones alleging the emergency, right? They also, as I cited in this book, invested in the technology. They also are considered part owners of the technology. They also had a primary role, according to this, in developing it, so much so that they own the intellectual property on it. And according to Axios, which is a wretched, lying blog, free or low cost public good. What are Pfizer's revenues on this free or low cost public good per year? Something like 50 or 60 million or billion, sorry, on this free or low cost public good. Hilarious. And there's no, reflection on that, on this statement at all. None. Just that's it. That's all. That's why it matters. That's all you need to know about why it matters. No question about it. No concern at all. Again, it gets worse. Way, way worse. So now that you know why it matters, you can be told what the big picture is. The NIH mostly funds outside research, but it also often invents basic scientific technologies that are later licensed out and incorporated into drugs that are sold at massive profits. I thought it was free. The agency rarely claims ownership stakes or pursues patent rights, but that appears to be different. Wait a second. I thought that it was just a low or cost public good, and this wasn't much of a story. Like, now we're doing something entirely different. It sold at massive profits. They have an ownership stake. They invented it, and this is also not normal for what they usually do. We do have some particular stake in the intellectual property behind Moderna's shot, says NIH Director Francis Collins. Fascinating. So they just admit it. So it's not only Axios reporting it, the NIH director admits it. So now you know that I'm not making all of this up, obviously. Again, it gets crazier as we get to the details. So NIH and Moderna have researched coronaviruses like MERS for several years and signed a contract this past December. Stated mRNA coronavirus candidates are developed and jointly owned by the two parties. Before I get to this incredible glossed over note, developed and jointly owned by the two parties. So we go back to this, right? Moderna sues Pfizer and BioNTech for patent infringement over COVID shot. Now, you would think that if it's a public good, right, that Moderna is not even really the owner, at least not alone. They didn't make the thing, clearly, on their own, at least. They didn't make it to some extent. They had government help. So why are they allowed to sue exactly? Why are patents existing on these products that are a public good in a time of emergency? Apparently, who knows, right? But again, this is why this is the topic of the day. Super fascinating. Now we get to the juiciest part here. Remember when this article was written? Okay, this article was written June 25th. 2020. This writer acknowledges that the NIH and Moderna signed a contract this past December, which means December 2019, that stated mRNA coronavirus vaccine candidates are developed and jointly owned by the two parties. Are you going to ask questions about that? The contract was not specific to the novel coronavirus, and it was signed before the new virus had been sequenced. That's it? That's the extent of your interest? It wasn't specific, and that's the extent of your interest. Okay, so the timing of that is not a concern to Axios at all, like at all. Considering, and we can do this really quick. Let's see when the official timeline is that the WHO themselves provide, right? This is confusing. Is this supposed to be like a nice chart? Like, what is this? This is horrific. Anyway, December 31. WHO country office in the People's Republic of China picked up a media statement by the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission for their website on cases of viral pneumonia in Wuhan. Okay, so the first identification of viral pneumonia in Wuhan is December 31, 2019. And then, according to Axios, before that, right, before they even recognized people were getting sick, the NIH and Moderna signs a deal on a shot that's directly related to the same virus in question. It's the same technology in question. And now you have the setup where, just like Rick Bright said, you could beam, in his own words, you could beam the sequence that they found to regional centers from China somewhere. Okay. This is, again, what makes this book the ultimate summary of everything happening here. This is only like one piece of the book, obviously, but, these are the things that need to be documented, because otherwise they would have been censored like they were the entire time. I think that essentially covers the story. To summarize, Moderna equals Firefest plus communism. As you can see, Moderna is a company that couldn't get a product to market related to its primary technology that it claims patents on, mRNA, right? Couldn't get a product to market. Scientific articles ridicule it for the past 5 years. Its own employees blow whistles on it, saying that its problems require a Hail Mary type solution. A Hail Mary type solution that they don't provide, right? That we don't know what the answer is. Because, and I'll open this up again one more time, because this is a new technology, right? And specifically, if the disease in question requires too little, if it requires too little protein, then it won't have the effect it needs to have. And if it requires too much, then it will be too toxic, right? So now we see what are the ingredients in the COVID shots. And we can go straight to the CDC for this. Maybe. Here we go. Okay. All right. And this is, again, why there's humor in this situation as well. if, let's say you are a woman and you're at a bar, right? And someone comes up to you at the bar and they say, "Here, have this drink." And you don't know the person very well. You don't know how credible they are. And they and they tell you, this line. The ingredients, I only used the ingredients I needed to be safe and effective as possible, right? I only used the safest ingredients. On your page, right, to say what's in it, the first thing that they say is that the ingredients are safe. I don't know about you, but I'm not taking the drink from the person who, when they're answering the question, what's in the drink, the first thing they're saying is that it's safe. Now, I can assure you, I scanned the rest of the page. There is no mention of how the problems that Moderna faced were solved for, right? They never answer these questions because they don't have the answers to these questions, right? How did they solve for the toxicity problem that Moderna was facing? I assume they didn't. I don't know that to be the case. Somehow they must, if you were to ask them, they must have some kind of answer, but they don't. They certainly don't inform you about it in order to get your consent, right? And so this is the people that you're dealing with who faced this problem, partnered up with the NIH, and instead of going down like Fyre, Moderna succeeds thanks to communism, thanks to the government getting involved, organizing the means they needed in order to succeed as a company, and executing on those means, right? So this is how we get to the simple equation. Moderna equals Fyre plus communism. And if you want to know more, September 6th, you will want to read this book. Everything that I just said is in this book. Everything that you would ever need to know about the shots, about what came before the shots specifically. Every chapter is a different action that was taken by these public health people, right? And I would highly, highly recommend understanding the history of it, especially in a time when censorship is just completely and utterly out of control. A time when you would least want censorship, right? When the term misinformation would be least useful. Because whether it's, in February 2020 when scientists, quote unquote, in the Lancet signed a paper saying, misinformation about the origin is harmful. Did they know in February 2020 what the origin was? How? How could they have known that? Right? So there is no misinformation. If their timeline is accurate, if their story is accurate, there is none because no one has the information. So you have to have debate on the topic. And debate on the topic is necessary even today because of how much these people buried all the truth and how much they perverted methodologies and how much they used different mechanisms that made no sense the whole time, right? The entire time. So these are all topics for debate. These are all topics that are not ironed out, that need to be ironed out, that you need the background on to understand. One of the things I say in Stranger Than Fiction so many times is that there are topics that are part of it that I don't draw conclusions on, right? I don't know whether it came from a lab or if it if there wasn't one at all, if it was just if the whole thing was fabricated. I don't know. I assign probabilities to each possibility based on what I do know, what I can figure out, the questions that I have that are answered or unanswered. And that's how this should be approached because no one does know the whole story. You come to that, and that's how history works, right? You look at all the sources, you bring the sources together, and you make a determination based on the sources, based on how much information you have. If you want to know what conclusions I came to on my own, if you want to come to your own, just to hear my conclusions so you can come to your own better, I have no interest in you thinking any certain way about it. These people clearly do, right? In their own words, they do. And the fact that they thought about it beforehand and had a problem with the fact that they would have to prove the thing they were trying to sell to people works, like that it would work and that it would be safe. There's no explanation for that that's valid. There's no good reason for that. Again, I hope not to spend every episode I do talking in this level of detail, right? This heavy of a topic. And I probably won't last long on YouTube even if I do that. But at the same time, I tried to just state history in Stranger Than Fiction. I don't want to... This topic is not one that I was interested in as much until it started affecting me. It's partly related, it's in a big way related to my career, but I was not this concerned about it until I was made to be concerned about it, until I was put in a position where I wasn't welcome in stores because of it, right? Like where I was being discriminated at work because of it, where I was discriminated by people in my community because of it, right? Where I had a parasite and I was told that, the urgent care clinic couldn't care for me while I'm shitting my brains out with a parasite, okay? I didn't want this to be like this much of a focus, but I wanted, as it was happening, I realized I have no choice but to tell the history, right? Because I was engrossed in the topic. Last year, a year ago from today, the situation was so different, right? We were put through some of the most intense psychological manipulation in human history, right? And that is not to be underplayed. You were told you couldn't go on planes. You were told you couldn't work. You were told that you couldn't go to gyms, that you had to stay home, that you had to avoid your family, that you couldn't see your dying family in a hospital, okay? This is one of the craziest historical events in human history. And if you made it through with your sanity, if you made it through and didn't cave to the things that they were saying, not only do you want to continue to learn from it, and honestly, like, reflect on it and be proud of yourself for getting through it. Whether you avoided the pressure or not, just having lived through it and maintained your humanity is an achievement. It's an achievement. And if you want people who come at, whether it's coming after you or people who don't know the whole story or people who still, believe what these obviously liars are saying, recommend this. Read it first and recommend it, okay? I can prove that it works, okay? I can prove that it's worth your time. Other people have attested that it's worth their time, like I mentioned. And, like I said, I might talk some things, right? I might reflect on some things that are in it in the future, but this channel primarily, I started out writing fiction. The funny thing about this book is, like, because I started writing fiction when this was going on, I was way too wrapped up in what was happening. I was too focused on it, trying to figure out solutions for myself and my family. And I couldn't focus on writing fiction at the time, right? I was in the middle of my fifth book and final book in this fiction series I was working on, and I just couldn't put all my energy into it because what was happening, right, was stranger than fiction. I mean, this is why I titled the book like I did, because it's hard to come up with something, uh, epic and surprising, and during a time where the things that are happening around you are just like the craziest fiction you could ever imagine, right? And so writing this book was like mostly cathartic for me, and hopefully it's cathartic for people who read it. But again, I think like next week, for example, I'm planning on talking about everything I've learned about writing. So next week will be all writing. It's been like, I guess, 6 years now, 6.5 years now that I've been writing books. So I have a lot that I've learned that I think people can save time struggling with. So that will, primarily be what I talk about there. I'll talk about other things in the future. Maybe I'll do interviews. I don't know. But I have my fiction book coming out soon, so I'll definitely talk about that next week too. Stranger Than Fiction is out on the 6th, and then my last book in my fiction series, Civil Lands, will be out on the 12th. So 2 books at once, which is super exciting. And yeah, basically it'll just be kind of free-for-alling it with stuff that I find interesting. Again, this medium is not like my first medium. There's a lot I need to learn about streaming, and I don't think like over the course of doing this that I'll probably have many, if any, viewers at all at first, but that's fine still. Maybe people will come back later and watch, or not at all. But either way, trying to get out of my comfort zone, trying to find new ways to connect with people on this kind of stuff. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed Moderna equals Firefest plus communism. A couple other things I'll just touch on that I think are funny for now. Bank of America launches zero down mortgage for Black and Latino borrowers. I mean, a lot of people will look at this and they'll freak out and they'll say, no, that's not fair. That's not fair. I want, to not put anything down on a house, and I want to get racked with debt. That's the point, right? If they get you feeling jealous, what they're getting you feeling jealous about is a big loan, because we live in a housing bubble, right? Where houses are incredibly inflated. So you're not putting anything down on it. So you're getting a bigger than normal loan, right? During a time when the Fed is hiking interest rates. So they're basically using the trap of egalitarianism, just setting these people up to fail, just like they did in the lead up to 2008. There's nothing to feel jealous about. They're destroying people. Just funny story of the week. Also funny is the reaction to the Amazon's Lord of the Rings. I like Vox Day a lot. She says, don't hate watch the Amazon abomination. I don't hate watch anything. I don't, other than Disney Star Wars. But even that, I didn't watch the third one because I was just, the first one was okay. When I first saw it, I was like, eh. The second one came out, and when they said that Rian Johnson was directing it, I got a little excited because I figured, maybe it'll be a little different. Maybe they'll make it more exciting, right? Go in a different direction with it. And they did go in a different direction, but it was horrific. And I guess that was probably my like introduction. That and the last season of Game of Thrones were my introduction to like just how horrible these big studios can be, right? Like what their objective is. It's not to make something good. It's to destroy. It's the opposite, right? It's to destroy the good thing and make it horrific in their own image, which is horrific. And so I had no intention of hate watching Lord of the Rings. It's not Lord of the Rings. It's something different. You can't even call it fan fiction because these people aren't fans of it. They despise it. They despise what made Lord of the Rings what it was. And so, you have people like Bezos who was banking on this, and apparently, according to this, a couple different reviews, I guess, people said that if this show fails, insiders say that executives could be forced to shut down Amazon studios. Hopefully, that would be fantastic. And maybe then, if people shut it down, people will move their focus towards new creators, right? Towards new stories, towards stories made by people who do ascribe to the values that J.R.R. Tolkien ascribed to, right? Like Vox Day writes books like that, you know? Like I write fiction books. You could read my series. Find someone who doesn't despise the things that makes a story good, right? Like consistent characters and world building and something other than CGI budgets. You know, people who don't make stories, you know, inclusive just to make them inclusive and woke and garbage, right? That's what these people do now. And if you keep watching their garbage, you can't be surprised when it's garbage, you know? And somebody shared a pretty funny meme about it was like a picture from Peaky Blinders, and he was like, everybody, no one hate watch, okay? No one. We all have to get together and just not hate watch, because there's that instinct, right? There's that instinct to want to just see just how bad it is, right? Like there's like a entertainment value in that, and I find that I cure that entertainment value by watching people like Mahler, right? Or people like the Critical Drinker or Doomcock. Because those guys, like, I don't have to watch the actual thing, but they can tell me what happened and I can laugh because they're funny also. And so my energy is going towards somewhere positive, which is laughter, and going towards people who think like me and, you know, at the same time, and share my values. And at the same time, not only that, but like someone like the Critical Drinker has a book coming out, which is, I guess, a suspense book. I was planning on buying it. I'll definitely going to buy it and do a review on that. Super excited about that. But that's where your energy should be focused, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that those guys shouldn't do what they do. They're funny. They're providing their own service. They're critiquing it in a way that's, you know, it's almost like you're watching the movie with a voiceover that's like kind of mocking it while you're watching it, right? Like they're making their own movie almost. And so I like that. I like putting my thoughts there. But yeah, I mean, the Rings of Power, obviously it's bad. It's hilarious. So staggeringly bad. It's hilarious. Everything about it is ill-judged to a spectacular extreme. This is a disaster dragon, plucked, spatchcocked with a tanker load of Paxo stuffed in its fundament, roasted and served with soggy sprouts. See, like, this is what I want to see related to Lord of the Rings. I don't want to turn on Amazon Prime and make them think that I'm watching it, you know, give them financial support. This is where I want my energy. This fantastic description, right? This is hilarious. Roasted and served with soggy sprouts. Like, it's perfect. That is like replacing what is missing by not having Lord of the Rings. And nothing is missing by not having Lord of the Rings. That's the other thing. Lord of the Rings is still there. I can watch the 4-hour versions of the originals. I've thought about this before. Like, I think I could probably watch the 4-hour versions of the originals many times and not be sick of it, you know? I've done it. I haven't like watched them back to back, like watched the whole series back to back, but I've thought about it after doing it. Is like, you know, I never feel like I'm getting deja vu or something, and I never feel like I'm in this circle. You know, it's always something kind of new about it, and because that's what you get when you watch something fantastic, right? Something that's just made with logos and is made for the good. Anyway, that's some of the interesting stuff this week. Maybe I'll wrap up. Yeah, I'll wrap up here. So we talked about Moderna, how much of a nightmare of a company that is. We talked about how Moderna basically is the same as Firefest. Their CEO was acknowledged by scientific reporters like Stat. They were publishing exposés about them in 2016 and 17 about how these companies were just investment companies, not pharmaceutical companies. These are from insiders, okay, whistleblowers within the company as recently as 16 and 17. We talked about how the NIH basically is the only inventors mentioned on the patents, according to Axios. We talked about how Axios in June 2020, they acknowledged this deal was made in December 2019, mind you, which they pretended wasn't a story, and how that communist arrangement allowed for Moderna to be a success as opposed to Firefest, which was a complete and utter disaster. Again, for more on Firefest, I would recommend watching the documentaries on Netflix. For more on this whole story surrounding Moderna, Stranger Than Fiction, finally, a year after I started writing it, 600 pages, 1,600 citations, comes out September 6th. Get yourself a copy. It's a epic ride. You'll probably be reading it for a few months, but it will be worth it. Whether you are awakened to the whole thing or not, if you know people who aren't, recommend it to them. If you get it and you like it, 5-star review it. Do not let me down on that. But it will be worth your time. Patrick Daly of the Pat Life says so. My episode with him will be out next week. What else? There's so much more. Like I said, next week I'm going to talk about everything I know about writing. It's not going to be a heavy episode like this one. It will not be as COVID focused because this week I've got this one coming out, and the week after that I've got another book coming out because I've been working my ass off for the past 3 years on these things, and it's finally time, and I'm pumped. I'm so pumped about it. They're both going to be so epic. And like I said, if you're interested in writing, tune in next week because I'm going to tell you every single thing that I learned in 6.5 years writing, from how to tell the story to how to write the story to how to market the story to how to build an audience for the story. All of it is coming next week. So thanks for tuning in. My name is NB Austin. Look out for Stranger Than Fiction. Find it on Amazon. Find it on my website. When you love it, 5-star review it. Recommend it to your friends and family. It will be worth your time. Unlike Anthony Fauci, I don't think that you shouldn't need proof. I have proof. It's on the back that people like it and that it works. But again, thank you. Talk to you guys again next week. This has been Nicholas Austin. Have a great Labor Day weekend and hook 'em horns.